Any declarations of community interest? And are the minutes of the previous meeting true and accurate record of what happened?
Yes.
So our first item is Clarion Housing. We're very lucky to have some people from Clarion with us this evening. Thank you so much for coming. We've got Simon Gagan, in your word, who's the head of responsive repairs. We've got Jane Bolton not here.
No, I'm any sort of Jane Bolton. I'm Vicky Bonner, Director of Housing at Clarion.
So Vicky
Bonner.
Vicky Bonner.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your title, sorry?
I'm Director of Housing.
Director of Housing. Thank you. We've got Mike Robbins, Planning Investment Manager.
Yep.
Hello. And we've got Paul Quinn, returning to the panel this year. Hello. Director of Merton Regeneration. So first of all, though, we have some resident speakers. We've got 3 minutes allocated for each speaker, so please don't run over the time. Please don't make me stop you. We've got can't see Christopher Holt, not here yet. No. Wakar Bassett. Hello. If you'd like to come forward. If you'd like to come forward. I've been cut off by my own microphone, probably still been speaking too much. What I'll do is I'll time you on my phone, and I'll give you 3 minutes. If you just introduce yourself and where you live, that would be really helpful. Let me just get my clock ready.
While you're doing that, I just let people know my name's Wakar Bassett. I live in Muffet Court on Gap Road, and I've lived there for 30 odd years. So when Merton had the stock, they then sold it to Merton Priory Homes, went through all the Affinity Sutton Circle, now Clarion. So I was given this opportunity, so thank you for the time that you've allocated for me. This is the first time I've ever come to these meetings to basically share my experience of Clarion, because I think enough is just enough. And I was told to describe an example of a repair that's been going through. And I'm not a professional speaker, but honestly, it doesn't take a lot of words from any resident when describing a Clarion repair or fancy words to show just how bad they are at their role, at their monitoring, at their job. I've had a leak in my hatch, which is above the communal corridors of my building, for the last 7 years. Every year I report that leak to Clarion. It's ignored, or we're told that work is done. In return, we get a service charge cost added to our service charge every year, but the leak continues, which is really baffling. It is, if there's surveyors, if there's people signing off on these works, what is going on? Every year since 2014, I get told in the summer it's fixed. In the winter, when it starts to rain, it leaks so much that the hatch stores the water like a swimming pool. It then leaks into my bedroom, it leaks into the corridors. Lately, it's been leaking into the electricity of the building. Last year, the whole building's electricity was blown out because of this. Last year, I was told work was done and completed again. This was the 6th time I was told. And I'm talking about 2018 when I say last year. So in 2019, in October, the leak started again. It went into the electricity, you could hear the sparks. On the 8th of October, I told Clarion that the leak has not been fixed. Nothing was done about it. Instead, Clarion 2 years before took out an injunction against me that I shouldn't email their CEO, because at the time it was him, now it's her. They were the only people that would get the work done for our building, for our estate. The only people that will actually do something and will see activity. So after this injunction was over in January, I emailed her again, clearing it up, and within weeks, this problem was resolved. So 7 years has been going on. In October, I told Clarion that the leak has occurred. I've sent videos of this leak. I mean, it's like a fountain when it's in the hatch. It then leaks into the walls of my bedroom, ruins the paintwork. Every year I spend around £150 to £200 calling in the painters, decorators to do the repairs. Every year I'm told that this is done. Every year I have to pay a service charge for that. Only this year I've monitored that repair myself, not Clarion, myself, to make sure that it is done properly. And I've diarised it on Twitter on the service that I've been getting, what monitoring has been done, the sign off, and still it leaked. And only then it was, confirmed. But just to end, contractors come, they mess around on the roof, they urinate on our roof. When I report that to Jane Bolton, her reply is, this is a complaint of a minor nature. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Okay, thank you very much.
These are the people that we're dealing with.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. And you've got somebody who doesn't like public speaking very well. So I'll move on to the next person.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Sarah Sharp on behalf of Alexander Brockley.
I've been asked to read I've been asked to read this on behalf of Alexander 30 on Hyde Park, 6 Ryder House. Clarion provides a minimum of maintenance at Hyde Park Estate, which increases the annual service charge every year. In 2019, my annual service charge increased nearly 18%. Unreasonable escalation of service charges is an abusive practice followed by resident associations generally. According to a Guardian article in December 2017, the homeowners trapped by police holes, the new cash cow developers states thousands of homeowners on private estates are facing unregulated and uncapped maintenance fees amid allegations that developers have created a cash cow from charging for communal areas not maintained by the council. Critics say the system is open to abuse because management companies have no obligation to keep costs down or provide evidence the services they charge for are being carried out. Buyers may find the bill spiral as soon as the management contract is gone. And is this what's happening in Hyde Park, and if so, what can be done to stop it? The charges of Hyde Park are for the following long list of purported services which are really not carried out. 50% administration fee, management fee and managing agent services, removing abandoned vehicles, refuse bin hire, building fire and flood insurance, caretaking, clearance of large rubbish items, communal stairway, hallway and pathway cleaning, communal electricity, communal lighting, communal window cleaning, concierge, day-to-day repairs, door entry service contract, fire protection, grounds maintenance, intensive housing management, laundry service, lifts, lightning protection, major works, provision of mechanical and electrical and other equipment, rooftop safety, sewer, service pump servicing, sinking reserve fund, television, aerial servicing contract and water hygiene management. In fact, very few of these services are provided adequately, and most are not provided at all. For example, refuse is collected weekly, or supposed to be weekly, and as a result, bins overflow and refuse overflows onto the grounds. Refuse on the grounds is picked up once weekly, so there's refuse on the grounds during much of the week. Communal cleaning is supposed to be performed weekly and consists of sweeping and mopping the stairways. Marked, defaced and broken building and utility structures are not cleaned or repaired. Grounds maintenance is supposed to be performed weekly and consists of cutting grass with large mowers, but shrubs and edges are untrimmed. There are many specific instances which could be listed and described, but you get the idea from my brief description. So I propose that the Committee of Hyde Park residents review the services provided in Hyde Park and the related charges that are imposed in order that a recommendation may be made for their improvement and cost savings. I do request a written reply to my proposal from the Sustainable Communities and Reviewed Scrutiny Panel and from Clarion at the following email address, which I'll provide just for data protection issues. Thank you.
Sorry. So could you repeat the recommendation?
A Committee of Hyde Park residents review the services provided at Hyde Park and related charges that were imposed in order that the recommendation may be made for their improvement and cost savings, and he requests a written proposal from the committee.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And our final speaker is Christopher Holt, hands up, is Cyprian.
Thank you. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to this committee. Much like the others who have spoken earlier this evening, my track record on this committee in complaining about Clarion housing is fascinating. I have a number of issues which I wish to bring up, but I don't feel that this is the particular forum in order for me to do so. But however, I will use this opportunity to highlight some of the cases in Clarion's misgivings, if I could use that word. We have one instance on Priory Close where a resident who has been notifying not just the caretakers but also the contact centre of communal problems regarding the roof of his property. The roof has been allowed to gather leaves which have fallen onto the area and has meant that the guttering is blocked. This in turn is leading to water down into his property. Once again, he's a leaseholder, so I would imagine some of the costs towards this damage will be coming to him. But the issue is that this should be cleared up by Clarion. Another is from a resident who coincidentally is residing in a property that is in the same area as the cleaning team. And very sadly, one of the aspects of this issue is that the incident from which this started began with the cleaning team's area. And it meant that water pressure leading up to the top of the building then wasn't working appropriately, and this impacted and affected that family's home. I would have liked to have shared with you videos and pictures, but I was unable to do so today with the IT services provided. But what you will see is that constantly they're having to throw away water every single day, and we're not just talking about one person living in this property. There were 5, a mother, a father and 3 children in a 1-bedroom home. Another is regarding, and this is more specifically a communal aspect, it affects the 11-storey block of Marsh Court. I have highlighted this on numerous occasions and I've had to get to the conclusion now. I've had to complain. Sadly, the complaint was closed on the 31st of January, and this complaint regards the overflow pipe. Mr. Gagan is well aware of that, who is in attendance in this meeting tonight. I would say that it's really quite apparent that this has been going on for 2 years, and it's meant that we've had 2 years of water passing through this. And one last one, if you could just indulge me. Again, it's another water waste issue, and I say this in view of the fact that this council brought about climate change, or it didn't bring about climate change, it announced climate change, or some people might say it did, but it informed the residents of this local authority that it was going to be working towards mitigating climate change. And this particular instance, again, is another overflow pipe. This is affecting a very elderly man and his family, and again, much like the other instance, is near an electricity source. So what I would have liked, an outcome from this, is for the panel to work together with a working party of residents so that we can go over these particular problems, but more specifically the onerous aspects of this should be coming back to Clarion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't think any other speakers have arrived. So, representatives from Clarion wanted to move towards just some questions. Okay, so there was lots out there. It's obviously a lot of frustration and a lot of repeated reporting of issues and things like that. So I wondered if maybe you can just reply to some of the top issues, and then we'll go over to the panel, and they'll be able to follow up with any further questions.
Is it worth, I mean, Simon just prepared a short presentation just on the repairs service within Merton. Is it worth him talking about that, and then we can talk about the individual ones? Is that helpful?
We have a copy of that, but it would be better if you could have answered the issues raised by the residents first, and then we'll go to the report that we all received.
Okay, shall I go to Simon then?
Yeah. Let's just briefly go through Moffat Court. The area where the leak was coming in is in the centre of the property. The roof was designed a number of years ago. I think the main issue was about the volume of water, particularly a couple of weeks ago, a month ago. What we've actually done is relined all the gutters around there, the flashings, and almost made it proof for the great amount of rain that we get these days. And particularly, I think it was 2 Sundays ago. I was just trying to remember when it was. Particularly, that was its biggest test, and hopefully that one is resolved. We'll wait to see. Some of the ones mentioned by Mr. Edmonds there on Marsh Court is quite interesting, really. And one of the reasons why the block is part of the regen is the condition, the age of a lot of the pipe work. It's not actually an overflow from a ball valve. The ball valves have been changed and they are fine. It's to do with the pipework configuration inside. To resolve it, we'd almost have to get into most of the flats. So this overflow, I think, happens a couple of hours early morning. Is that right? Not for the rest of the day at all. And it's something to do with backflow up into the tanks. So when the ball valves actually turn the water off, water is going backflow into the tanks and then it's out to the overflow. We've made some efforts, however, it is still going on. So we need to try and resolve that. But it is an intermittent one, and only very peculiar between 2 and 4 in the morning, I think, at that sort of time. The rest of the day and the rest of the time, there's none at all.
That's not frequent, sorry for the comments, I mean, it has happened sometimes during the day, but consistently between 2 and 5 in the morning, every morning.
And that's not to do with the tanks, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's saying needs regeneration. One of the small reasons, really, is the existing condition of the plumbing. It's that those buildings were put up in the early 60s, is that right? Really for a 30 to 40 year life, and they've vastly exceeded that. So we do need a solution to it. We will hopefully get a solution to this one at Marsh Court before regen kicks in. Is that 18 months or so?
Marsh Court will be the first building that we would hope to demolish at High Path, and the people who live in Marsh Court will be rehoused in the new homes that have been built right outside the window now in around about 18 months from now.
But within that 18 months, you'll be looking to fix this problem.
Oh, of course, yes.
Is there a kind of timescale about when you think you'd hope to have a fix for the problem?
Well, we've gone through all the easy options, and it's probably going to be access into quite a number of flats. We have had this issue previously, and it's sometimes where people have done their own plumbing, put in a power shower, and they've connected the mains, cold water mains, into the down service from the tank. Plumbers shouldn't connect those two together, but if they do, what that actually means is that somewhere along the line, mains water pressure will go back up the ground service and fill the tanks up. Not to a massive extent, but that sort of backfilling is quite common in blocks of flats, particularly where people do, and people want power showers these days, and some plumbers probably aren't as scrupulous as others, and that breaks the plumbing regulations. So I think we're going to have to systematically go through the floors and try and work out where this is happening.
And so was there any other points you wanted to cover in response?
The statement about Six Rider House, yes, there are a lot of services that we provide, and we have to provide them. They are statutory compliance. So where we have lightning protection, where we have communal water tanks, we have to comply with LA, the water regulations. Communal lighting has to be tested every 5 years, and there are quite a number of those, and particularly since Grenfell, we've been really rigorous in how we do it. We maintain the records. So it's not easy, and I accept that for people living in blocks of flats. The amount of testing and compliance just on lifts, and then we have communal lift insurance testing as well. So the costs are charged in accordance with the leases. They do vary in some cases, but we do consult on when we start new contracts, what the costing mechanism is. People can make observations. So we don't pick figures out of the air. All of these are properly tendered, consulted prior to the contract starting.
Okay, well let's turn to the report if you wanted to talk us through that.
Okay, this is just a brief, really, review of where we are this year. I'll start with responsive repairs, and then Mike will go on to talk about planned. So just about responsive repairs. Independently, every month we have a firm called the Leadership Factor, who come in and carry out a customer satisfaction of all completed repairs. So at the end of every month, they get given the whole list of everything that's completed. They randomly select across Clarion, including at Merton. And at Merton, they select 75 of the completed repairs and do a random sample with a customer satisfaction, a number of questions, it's probably about 20, all about first time fix, how did it go on the day, were you well informed. The current satisfaction level is 85.4%. Previous month it was 85.5. It's been fairly consistent in that low to middle 80s. The target is 85%. And just below it on the table there's quite a number of our other KPIs that we measure, which are particularly important, the first time fix. And I'm pleased to say that December was the first time we had them all in the green, so that means they've achieved the targets, including our turnaround of empty properties, the voids, which we got down to 11.4 days. Just a couple of other little things. Gas servicing. We have nearly 6,000 individual boilers which have to be serviced every year. Our current performance is 99.8% compliance. We only had 8 properties at the end of December which we couldn't get into. Those properties go into a process of gaining access. None of the ones that we have actually are long-term ones, so we normally get in after 1 month or so. But again, we have a requirement to do that every 12 months. Just a little bit about fire risk assessments. One of the things after Grenfell that Clarion took on straight away, even without any recommendations, was bolstering up our fire risk assessments, our response to Grenfell in terms of fire doors, alarms, across our portfolio. That includes street properties, converted street properties, as well as estates. We've spent an awful lot of money, which we otherwise may have spent on other planned maintenance, but we're still spending quite a bit. And we rigorously check the actions on every month. And that, what I mean by actions is, are people storing things on corridors, areas that would be means of escape. And we get through all those actions every month, with very, very few remaining, and most of those are closed off within a short period of time.
Thank you. The next section is on the planned investment for cyclical maintenance. Planned investment is the major works, which is the replacement of major components like kitchens, bathrooms, roofs, doors, etc. I look after the whole of South London, so that includes everything within the M25 and south of the Thames. I've got a team, individual team that actually looks after just Merton itself, and this year we'll be looking to spend in the region of 9.6 to 10 million pounds just in the borough of Merton. That work is split up between the components, and I've listed there the number of components that we'll be replacing within the borough. 166 kitchens and bathrooms. We're looking at 90 roofs. They're just street properties rather than blocks, and we're doing external window installation of about 22 properties. That just makes up part of our work. The other side is the project work, which looks after work to blocks and to where we've got leaseholders. In respect to this, we've got a new process that we've just been putting in place for work on these blocks. It means we take a bit longer time to do the actual works, but it looks at it more holistically. So instead of turning up to a block and doing the decorating, we'll take a step back and we'll engage other stakeholders. So we'll get the repairs team, housing teams. We also invite leaseholders and residents to come along and ask what they require and take to the property. Often we can see what needs to be done, but it's the residents and the occupiers there that often have other ideas what we need to do. What we then do is put all these ideas together. We'll then look at it, see which are feasible, and then we get the work priced up. We then have another meeting with leaseholders and residents to explain what we're doing and go through any costs and see if there's any concerns, and then we undertake the work, and then we'll meet again afterwards just to go through it. With those, what we're looking at is at the moment some major works on Poplar Court in Wimbledon. It's about £2.3 million investment to the 13 blocks there. We're replacing new roofs, replacing the windows, doing some electrical works and the decorating. This one in particular was one where we had to replace the roofs. When we got on site and had a look around, Simon was saying that there's a lot of properties there that have single glazing. They're actually UPVC frames, but with single glazing. So it was then taken, if we're doing the roofing, we need to put scaffolding up. It's trying to make best use of the scaffold. So we're not then going back in a couple of years' time, put the scaffold up again, which means not only costs the association, but also costs the leaseholders. So it's trying to make sure that when we go on site, we do everything and we don't have to return for a long time afterwards. At the Elm Estate in Mitcham, we're replacing the communal electrics up there and doing communal decorating afterwards once we've done the works. Again, with that, there's some roofing works that require to be done, but then it's not urgent. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave that for probably another 5 or 6 years. And then when we do that, we put the scaffold up, we do the external decorating at the same time. We know that some decorating needs to be done, but we don't want to just put the scaffold up just to do the decorating. It's going to cost probably £100,000 a block. We'll wait a bit. We'll do the internal decorating now, and we'll do the external decorating and put the scaffold up to replace the roofs. London Road again, we've done some communal electrics and decorating. Wide Away, we've got 2 blocks down there, where again, we're doing the roofs, but whilst we've got the scaffold up, we're doing the external decorating because they've got rendered walls. And at Frensham Court, we've carried out some communal decorating and done the door entries. What we're looking at is more work for next year because it takes quite a while, as I said, to actually get these things set up. We're looking at undertaking major works at 4 Acres, estate over in Merton, where we're decorating and replacing windows. Highlands Estate, at the moment, that is going through Section 20 process. We've had a number of prices on this, and this is one of the old schemes where we didn't go through the process we're now going through. So we've had to go and restart the Section 20 process here. We had a meeting with residents and leaseholders, and they expressed quite a lot of concerns about the works, especially the electrics that we're carrying out, which are quite a high cost. We're now reviewing that. We've taken on board residents' concerns. We've stopped the leasehold consultation. We're now getting a second opinion on these electrics. We'll then know whether they need to be done or not. If they don't, we'll take them out of the Section 20 and we'll reissue the notices again with revised prices. Bushy Park, we're looking to do some major works with windows and decorating. Southview, there's 4 blocks up there which we're going to replace the communal ventilation system, decorating some roof repairs. And then at Glebe Court, again, this is one where we need to do the works to the roofs, and whilst we're doing it, we'll do the external decorations and some other major works at the same time. But a lot of these, what we do is, once we look at the property, we then take a step back and work at exactly what needs to be done with other people and other stakeholders, and then take it forward.
Okay, I think I'll go into the panel now so we need to ask any questions.
Yeah, thank you for going through that. One of my concerns is mostly about health and safety, and when I'm hearing from people about water and electric mix, and that worries me, or high rises where there's no risk that working. So, for instance, my first question is about lifts in the high power. It's a concern brought up to me by Councillor Benbow. He wants to know why repeated cleaners get fixed, or only temporary fixes that seem to work very long. Why is it that it's still not working now? And he doesn't like doing the inspection, so he doesn't know what he's talking about. So yeah, the main concerns about this or being broken. How do you deal with that? Will you do a quick fix? And how do you look after the elderly and those who are vulnerable who will basically get trapped otherwise?
The lifts, the lifts are on a maintenance cycle every 3 to 5 weeks. There's probably a slightly higher maintenance cycle on Hyde Park because of the age of the lifts. There is no embargo about, even though we're potentially having regen in 18 months, about doing permanent repairs to them. They are being looked at for the next financial year for a little bit of investment. Particularly, I'm not sure whether it's Makel or Hudson, but there is still a commitment for Clarion to do all of those repairs. Yes, they have been intermittent. Part of the problem has been to do with electric supply in the area and the phases going down, which has affected the lifts. They've been repaired and made more robust. UK Power Networks would really like to renew the power into the 3 tower blocks, and that may happen as well. They fund that. They have had a lot of problems within that area of South Wimbledon. So some of the problems with the lifts aren't the actual lifts, it's the supply going to it. But you still have a commitment that we do all the servicing. The insurance company do their testing and servicing as well. They're very robust. They wouldn't let us get away without doing that, not that we would want to do that anyway. So they're our sort of critical friend on that kind of issue.
Councillor Bundy, and then I'll go to Councillor Stafford and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. It was helpful to have the table of KPIs on the front page. Could you just describe the data so I can understand it better? So, what is it? How is it? What's the coverage? And how is it aggregated? And what's the range if there is one? And you talk about here in the paragraph above it, so your best performing month, what's the worst performing month? And what's the mitigating, or what's the what are the seasonal aspects of this data? And finally, what is, out of curiosity, KPI 2? It's missed from the list.
All the data comes out of the repairs system, which is a system called Impact Repairs. This is real-time information when the job is put on the system, when the appointment's been made, when the target date is put on the job. So the target date is for a routine is 20 working days. For an emergency, it's 4-hour response for 24-hour completion. The operatives carry a PDA, which is connected to the system, so it records the time they attend the appointment. It also records the time they complete the job. All that information is taken directly off the system. There's no manual interference with it at all. So the integrity is probably as good as you can get within those kinds of systems. It's very similar to what British Gas use and a lot of people use in the industry these days. The results for December are pretty good. It's interesting, I've looked back in the past, and seasonal variations used to be more difficult in the winter, with some repairs particularly, with lacking daylight time used to take a bit longer. It seems to have gone on its head this year a little bit. probably, if you say the worst, and the worst ones are in the low 90s, was probably in the summer, in August. Now, whether that's to do with availability or whatever, weren't quite sure. So when we get to the winter, quite often we make sure we're a bit more rigorous because we know they're going to drop. This year, actually, December was been the best of all the months within 2019. But yes, I think we're pretty confident about the information, and certainly where there's no manual interference, which there was many years in the past. We know the figures are the figures; they come off the system.
We do about 500 repairs in Merton a week, don't we, Simon? So that, and it's NG, our partner contractors, who do those repairs on our behalf. And it's certainly true to say that we have worked incredibly closely with them over the last couple of years to say, come on, you've got to improve your performance, and we've got an action plan with them and everything. And to be fair, we are really starting to see the results. So we're trying to say this is the best scorecard that we've had, but it is based on 500 repairs a week, so it's quite substantial.
Would it be, one follow-up and one question, would it be possible to share to the committee the annualised figures or break down perhaps on a quarterly basis so we can see the variation over a longer time period, just so we can understand the progress you've made on that, as you said?
Sorry, Councillor, I'm going to have to go to Councillor Stafford now, I'm afraid, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really know where to start, to be honest. I've got so many queries. But can I just concentrate at this stage on the plan maintenance fee that you're operating? Because you're talking about all the work, the costs that you've invested in various sites on the borough. Now, one of the estates in my ward, I'm very much on 4 estates in my ward, the Oldfield, the Vernon, Sadler, and the old Eastfield. Now, the Vernon Court, the Vernon estate, has been on the estate's management inspection, which is done about quarterly, I think. For some years now, with the highlighting the fact that the concrete's falling and the rusty ironwork, which is making some of the balconies and the porches in danger of collapse, is urgently needed to be repaired. And it is a health and safety aspect. Bits of concrete have actually dropped down on the back balconies below, and if anybody's standing after them, then have a headache. So why hasn't that been included in your maintenance plans? And just to follow up on Aidan's question about the way the KPIs were, how they were reduced, and you've explained the system that you go through when a repair is reported and this, that and the other. I'm sure a lot of questions about that as well. But there doesn't seem to be anything on the system. You know, you're saying that the data shows when the work person starts on work, when they finished it. It doesn't give any indication of whether the resident has actually signed off the work. And because when you try to follow up on the complaint and say, oh well, the work person has reported it, that it's done, and that's it, so we close the case. What sort of system is that? Thank you.
On the Burnham estate, we, when we actually carried out, we had some cherry pickers up there, which were then removing any of the loose concrete and made sure that there was no health and safety issues up there. And they then painted over to make sure we had no further degradation of the concrete. So at the moment, touch wood, that should be safe because they knocked off and they removed any loose concrete. In respect to that, I didn't list all of the projects down here, and we are scoping up a number of other estates The Burnham is one of them that we're looking at. At the moment we're prioritising them. The Burnham we were looking at was potentially replacing the roofs up there. And when we were doing that, we then looked at what other works like the windows. The roofs potentially got another 4 or 5 years left to run until they actually need replacing. What we didn't want to do was put up the scaffolding more than once. And it was said that actually we can probably leave them for a little longer. We're then looking at other smaller works that we can carry out at the Burnham, that we internal decorating, etc. Decorating, we can do some of the decorating from a cherry picker at the balconies, but it wouldn't be full-scale works like we're going to be doing at Glebe, because the roofs at Glebe need to be replaced rapidly. With some sort of number of leaks there which we're attending. At the moment at the Burnham, the roofs will last for another 5 or 6 years, so we're not going to do major works at the Burnham, but there will be some other works, not quite so major, which will be carried out, which will be scoping out.
I'll move on to Councillor Button. Just for the benefit of time, can we keep our questions and responses a bit shorter? That's all right.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a few quick ones. Just on the satisfaction survey here. From my impression, it seems that if this is just going through NG's, may correct me here, if it's going through NG's data here, where does that seems to fit into individual facts and their individual issues? How do communal issues that might be reported from various sources go into this? And then leading on to my second point, it does seem to me that while there is a lot of reassurance in the run-up to the regeneration that individual repairs are still being done, the buildings as a whole, there's the sense given to me by residents that, for instance, stairways, communal areas aren't as well maintained or as maintained as quite often. There's a good example in the blocks where he did have a response after the Grenfell Tower, where he did a very good job of doing the doors and doing the stairs in a very safe way. But I just think it's damaged you in a way of the rest of the box looking in disrepair in comparison. Just a bit on that. I'll leave it at that.
Just to say, I think we recognise the communal issue, and quite a number of projects now we're including, as a matter of course, the internal communal redecoration, just like we were talking about Elm Estate, and we've done it on Barron Estate and a few others. So we recognise that I think to bring the overall look up, we need to ramp up some of those amount of communal repairs. There's communal KPIs. There are 2 communal KPIs on there. Those are measured in the same sort of way. We don't do customer satisfaction on communal repairs. It's just about internal repairs. That's probably something we could look at somewhere along the line. It's capturing that data, because quite often people report communal repairs. It could be a staff member who's reported it. So how do we capture that information? But we could do that.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Fairclough and I'll come back to Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the Section 20 consultation process. I can obviously see the advantage of combining all the works together, but equally, I suspect that brings quite high costs for leaseholders, or can bring quite high costs for leaseholders. And I wondered if you could talk me through how you manage leaseholder kind of resistance to that, and what other mechanisms you offer them to help them through that process. When we've heard tonight from residents who talked about quite high bills and how they manage that, we've also got a real submission as well in front of us. I wondered if you could touch on that.
I mean, we would, when we first look at the estate or a block, the initial repairs will either come from the repairs team. If there's a roof needs to be undertaken, we will then go and have to speak with leaseholders, residents, and other stakeholders within the company and externally to find out, ascertain if there's any of the works that need to be carried out. What we don't want to do is, if there's a roof that needs to be replaced, put a scaffold up, take it down again, and put it up again 2 or 3 years later, which is going to cost people money. Whilst it might be a bit more expensive initially, when we do the whole work together, it is just one lump sum rather than repeated scaffold. We've got scaffold that is, we're looking at the Burnham, the scaffold's over £100,000 per block, which, when divided by 40 leaseholders or 40 people, 40 flats is a lot of money. By actually engaging with leaseholders, they can understand why we're doing things, but also we can then gather information from them and undertake works that they require as well, rather than just doing what we think is necessary. What we've found is that Simon will then come back with, or the person will come back with some rules or repairs that you can carry out. The reason is that it's costing a lot of money to put up scaffolds if you've got a roof leak, especially when some of the blocks, like on Elm or on Glebe, are 5 stories high. You're costing about £1,500 at least just for the scaffold up to do a repair. That then gets passed on to leaseholders when they do the final, the end of year accounts. So what we're trying to do is remove the repairs. If we can do a temporary repair and leave it, that's fine. What we do is we'll do aerial surveys, so we get cameras on drones, etc., on poles, to ensure that the work needs to carry out. That's why at the Burnham, we're not doing the work just yet, because it can wait, and we can then prioritise things like Glebe, where you've got leaks, Southview. So what we try and do is make sure that when we do go through the process, we're including all the works, rather than going back numerous times and having numerous Section 20 consultations with leaseholders.
You are right that does sometimes lead to a one-off larger cost and sort of smaller individual costs, but we feel that it represents better value for money for us and for the leaseholders to do that.
Just to help on this point of Section 20, so thank you for highlighting the statement that one of our residents has written to us, Cliff Maslin, to talk about, so this isn't specifically about the cost of scaffolding, but the cost of you procuring replacement, say, in this case, windows, and getting a quote for £13,000, but then after residents go away and get quotes from other businesses and find that they can get it for £5,000. When those kind of disputes happen, that's a similar thing happened to one of our estates in Watermeads. It's quite a big, well publicised thing that happens. When residents raise those concerns, what lessons have Clarion learned to take those on board and not make residents feel as if they can't trust the quote that comes to them? But then also, when they do raise these concerns, it does take a long time to get answers about work that's been itemised on some bills. I've got other residents in the farm, Blackberry Farm, who will ask questions about things, but will take months to get a reply about why they're being charged certain costs.
I think certainly on the leasehold side, we've tried to be a lot more open, and with our new process, engaging with leaseholders, we're a lot more open. We can show them prices instead of just saying it's going to be £13,000 for the windows, whatever. We produce and we send out to the leaseholders with a consultation a full breakdown of the costs. So it shows exactly what the scaffolder is costing, what the roof is costing, what the decorating is costing. So resident leaseholders can see exactly where the items are. So it's all itemised out, and they can see exactly where it is. Fully take on board that sometimes leaseholders say they can get a cheaper price if they go down the road and speak to a local contractor. What we have is we've looked at this again, we have a lot more stringent health and safety regulations. We can't just have one man in a van turn up. We have to have welfare facilities. We also have social value, which is put into the price which the contractors put to us.
Do you have a list of contractors you work for? Is there one that you
we have one partner contractor, and they have a number of subcontractors where they go to, which they get prices from.
So they can set the price and...
No. It's been subject to a procurement exercise initially, so we know that we've got the best, we've got what we think are the best prices, but leaseholders can always come forward with their own contractors, which we would then look at. But as Mike says, often they don't have the relevant health and safety and that kind of thing. But we do always, leaseholders are allowed to put forward an option for looking at their own contractor, and we would then look at them, but have a look at whether that would work or not work. But we have got our own procurement framework as well, which we have gone through.
So the residents aware of the standard you're looking for in contractors when they go out and look for other ones?
That's a really good question, and it might be that we need to put some more communication in the letters out to leaseholders and residents about this is under the manifest and everything. So that's a really good point, actually.
I'll go to Councillor Mundy because I've talked to you.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the data and my previous point, could
could you just refresh us what actually is KPI 2? And also, out of curiosity, because of the nature of the issues raised tonight, I was wondering, back on lessons learned, about tapping into what the Ombudsman does, and are there any active or how many investigations have there been over the last year, and how do you factor that into your KPIs as well?
There is no KPI 2.
Okay.
That wasn't enacted when the book came out, so there is no KPI. So that encompasses all the KPIs that we've got here. We have a number of ombudsmen. We always give people the option at the end of our stage 2 process that if they wish to take it further. I'm pleased to say we don't have a lot. On the repairs side, I can't talk about the rest of the housing issues because I haven't got those figures with me. I think I can only remember 3 in the last year, which is really, really good. Sometimes the ombudsmen come back to us and say, can you reconsider this again, and we might reopen it as a stage 2 and we come to a conclusion on that. And occasionally, yes, it does, we are found against, and we do learn from maladministration on it. So it was 3 on the repairs last year.
Yeah, question on the nature of getting through to you to, let's say, there's a query, let's say an elderly person is concerned about water getting into his electrics. How do they actually contact you after hours or on a weekend, let's say? Because I've got an example here again from Councillor Benbow, who said that a resident tried phoning during the daytime and council hours many times, couldn't get through. In the end, Councillor Benbow contacted one of our council officers to get through some emergency work done. Apparently, Steve Langley is aware of the case in question. So how do you resolve sort of vulnerable residents who are struggling to get through? Does it take a councillor or somebody here at the council to escalate it?
Yeah, no, so it shouldn't take that. So we have moved to a new IT system about in November of last year, so we did have some glitches which we have acknowledged. So it has taken a little bit longer than we would like for people to get through, but we are getting through that now, and the service standards that we're giving are getting back to normal levels. We have got an out-of-hours provider who should answer the phone. That shouldn't have affected them in any way, so I can only apologise if they haven't picked up the phone and dealt with that accordingly. But if you want to give the details, more than happy to. But we did have a sort of temporary glitch which we've worked through in the compensation.
I'm just interested what the speakers, the residents have heard tonight and what their view of the presentations that they've received back. I'm interested in what the residents have to say.
Can I give a brief response?
Yes.
I'll be brief, I promise. I'm still flabbergasted actually as to the response and the nonchalant manner, and I do appreciate, Simon, that you've been with Clarion or Circle Nursing Priory for a great deal of years, so you've seen the changes, and you and I have crossed swords on many a time. But I find it quite peculiar given what you just said. Sorry, I've forgotten your name, I apologise. Sorry, I've forgotten. With regards to what you've just said, so the out-of-hours service that is provided, if a resident has an issue with a specific case that they're dealing with themselves, and that point has been raised to the contact centre, they have a job reference number. That reference number is irrelevant to an out-of-hours provider because they can't relate to that, and it's almost as if, and it's still, as Simon and Paul would remember, some years ago I was the chair for the repairs and maintenance panel for Circle Nursing Priory, and we really tried to insist that those two aspects were joined together. I'm still flabbergasted that is still not the case now. So that needs to be rectified, and given the fact that Clarion is one of Europe's largest housing associations, the fact that we're in this position right now, I'm having to speak on behalf of residents and wasting councillors' time. It's really quite sad, to be frank.
Sorry, so just to clarify, you report something, you have a reference number, if you call the hours number to say this thing is, still happening,
Yes.
they don't understand.
Yes, the person who's in the out of hours, so after 5, 6 o'clock.
So this exact thing happened to me on behalf of one of my residents a week ago on a Saturday, when she had a leak in her kitchen for just over a week. And it explains why the people I spoke to had no idea at all what was going on. So how can you rectify that then? How can we join out of hours to the work that's been scheduled in? But then also, how are we keeping on top of all the jobs that are coming through? So do they get registered in the call centre and kind of go off into the ether, or is there a nice, proper workflow tracking system that you have in place?
In terms of jobs that come through sort of 9 to 5, they're logged onto the system, they go off to the contractors, and to be fair, generally most of them do get done without any issues whatsoever. Clearly something's gone wrong there, so it wasn't rectified, am I hearing it right, wasn't rectified during the day, so then it became an emergency out of hours.
Yes.
So in some ways, regardless of whether we got it during the day or not, if it's an emergency at night time, we would normally deploy to get somebody there as an emergency. Do you see what I mean? So the fact that we might not have the same reference number is largely irrelevant. If it's an emergency where we need to go out, we would go out.
But obviously you run your organisation the best way. I can't tell you how to do that. But would it not make sense for the person you're sending out on an emergency job to understand what it is they're going into? Because in the case of my resident, someone would turn up and go, well, I don't have the right tools now, I'm going to have to leave because it's 3 o'clock in the morning. So
If that's the IT system, put it in there, shouldn't we?
Yeah. So in an ideal world, that would be great. I'm not saying it happens every single time, but what I'm really saying is if it is a genuine emergency that needs to be sorted out, we would deploy somebody there and then. Do you see what I mean? So they don't necessarily need to have that history. If they do, that's even better. But actually, if water's pouring down the walls or something like that, we would deploy to go out anyway, regardless. And you generally get enough information over the phone to know. I mean, when we go out as an emergency, it is to stop an emergency. Do you know what I mean? It's not to do a job that you would generally do during the day because it's classed as an emergency. So it's very much just making safe until the next working day.
I completely understand that. But it would be good for the person going into that situation to understand that person saying they have reported that at midday and it's become an emergency because nobody's turned up and they have that information.
So could we just hear from the other resident as well?
Yeah, so in regards to section 20, I'd just like to say I'm quite shocked about the explanations of section 20. I've recently received a section 20. No one contacted me or the other leaseholders at all in the building to tell me that the BT Openreach wires need to be neatened up, and for that they need to put a scaffolding up which will cost over £1,000, and to take satellite dishes off, 4 bolts, put them on the scaffolding, each will cost £200. Also, we talk about itemised bill, there's just an Excel document. One of the bills that I've received says £24,756 as a headline page. The itemised bill says £28,920. So where is the checking in this? So I'm quite shocked about the explanations of section 20 and how the process is, because it's not working and I've not had that service.
I don't know the exact details of your case.
I have
Your
made
court.
observations.
Yeah.
In 2 months, I've had no
Right.
response.
I know there was some observations for yourself and from an MP, and I believe that some observations were responded to, and there's some more observations still
None
to
of
be.
them have been responded to.
But I'll look into that.
Yesterday, I
know that some-
received a letter saying, dated 8th of January, saying that your observations will be responded to in 21 days. That's yesterday, dated the 8th of January.
Right, I apologise. I don't know the exact details, but I'll have a look at it, and I'll speak to you in the morning.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'll look into it because I know we did some work at Moffat Court with some
And
other
you
blocks,
just one
and
building.
there's your blocks we
Okay.
carried out. But I'll look into it. Come back to you.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
but please do follow
Yep.
up. But so that is not a unique case. There's something strange with the system there. Again, lots of residents come forward with that. And also, Councillor Slapp and I did a visit to Eastfield very, very recently. And a lot of residents there have reported lighting issues for over a year. They've got this overflow pipe issue with green sludge now going down the side of their walls because they haven't been replaced for over a year. and there's all these wires hanging out of, junction boxes and stuff. What we really, really appreciate for somewhere like that, because we know that region's coming, and yes, fair enough, is some kind of site visit, because they feel as if the inspections that are happening aren't acknowledging these issues. So if somebody senior could please come and meet Councillor Sutton, we're happy to walk around, just to show you some of the issues that they have, because it's not getting resolved through the normal channels in any way, shape or form. So I think it'd be good to start moving on to recommendations. So it's been quite a short time. Did you want to say something quickly?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. Just very briefly, because it's just flashed up on Facebook. I just want to, you're temporarily moved out your HQ. I just want to understand that you definitely returned to Merton once.
Sorry, in terms of the office, we're temporarily moving out of we're moving out of the Grange, I think, which you all know about. And we are moving into a proper office with resident access and everything like that, which will be much, much better. But unfortunately, there's a period of time where we need to get out of the Grange and the new office isn't ready. So that's not ideal, we accept that entirely, but we absolutely are committed to having an office with customer access in the borough, no question whatsoever.
Thank you.
So we're going to start with our recommendations. I was just wondering, we've done a few ideas here. Do you want to hear what Councillor Hoffman and I were thinking, or so the resident who wrote in about working groups, I don't know what your setup is like for that. So I know that you've got Clarion Voice and you've got those kind of things. But again, around the issue of coming out and actually looking at what's happening on the ground, is there the opportunity to create a working group of people, maybe on region sites specifically, to look at issues of repairs and things like that?
Mr. Chair, as you know, there's the Merton Community Panel, which was being established when we moved to Clarion. I think there's potentially scope to use perhaps the community panel as the focus for that activity, given the formality that the carries already, and it's something we would bring through this. So I think that's certainly something that's worth exploring in the community panel perhaps at the next meeting.
But there is a repairs, I actually sit on that panel. There is a repairs section, but yes, it has taken a bit more of a turn towards charitable donations, but perhaps there needs to be a redoubling of efforts to make it about repairs and about these sort of things. But we can definitely feed that back. So the other thing was about the data. Just showing us December isn't helpful. It doesn't show us what's before and what is after. So having an annualised data set, and the next time I hope you would be more than welcome to come back to this panel, I'm sure, as a recommendation for the next municipal year to come back again. It would be great if you could bring with you a set of annualised data so we can look at the trends. But then also, if you could, within that data, look at where things maybe have gone wrong and kind of some explanations as to why that's happened, just so we can start digging into that a bit more. And the thing about the contractors, so if a resident is allowed to go off and find their own contractor, can we make sure that they understand what standard it is you're looking for, so that they're not just told flat no and kind of have the door shut in their face? Would you go between energy with you?
We can consider asking them. We can't make them come. We can certainly consider asking them. We need to understand the rationale for having energy.
I think it'd be interesting to understand from their perspective how, when jobs are put into the system and when they are signed off, how they see that, because.
I'm not sure having energy there just to explain that is particularly helpful, but we can certainly go away and give you some more detail about that. I'm more than happy to do that.
Is there a way of having resident sign off included in this sort of process of repairs? So is there a way of before it's closed, having quality control through the resident? Obviously, what's done in someone's eyes might not be in someone else's, but just to have the resident kind of see the approval.
I mean, the resident satisfaction tends to be a proxy for that, because actually if you're not satisfied with the job, you will give a very low satisfaction. So it's interesting here that, the indicators are all green, which is interesting, but actually the satisfaction is one of the highest it's been. So it's sort of like all of those other indicators. You absolutely know if things are going in the right direction because the satisfaction is higher.
Is that data based on every person who
No,
has a pair?
it's not. It's just, as Simon said, it's just a snapshot of a number of residents or something like that. So, what I tell you, can I just say one thing that we are looking at having? It's something called locales, and I don't know whether anybody's heard of it, but it's something we're looking at trialling with our own contractors, client response, our in-house providers, and if it works, it's something we want the other providers to have, which is every time you have a job is done, and you get an email or a text saying how was it, and actually a series of questions, and that would be for every single job that we did. We're trialling it currently, and we're about to trial it with Cloud Response, who are our internal contractors. If that works, we would be very keen for Engie to use something similar, and I know I've had discussions with James, the convention director, and he's really, really keen on it. So I think that's even better, because that's just, a text afterwards. I can't guarantee how quickly we can get it in, but we're about to trial it with our in-house providers, and then if it's successful, we hope to roll it out.
I think that's exactly what we would be looking for. That sounds great. That sounds really good, really positive. And would you be able to humour us with a couple of site inspections from senior people, just to come and see what's happening on the ground in some areas of massive concern where the normal channels of reporting aren't working?
Yeah, we can
For instance, East Fields and High Path involving councillors on this panel and council member as well.
Yeah, no, we can organise that.
Okay, that's it then. Thank you so much. I hope that wasn't too tough. And get home safely. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for waiting so patiently. We are now going to agenda item number 5, which is the diesel levy implementation. We're just going to go to cabinet members first, just to kind of give you an overview, and then we go to officers first, and then cabinet members, just to give us an overview in terms of the strategy.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll say a few words in introduction. First thing it's worth reminding ourselves of the genesis of this, and it's arose out of the implementation of the diesel levy in 2017, and then members agreed in terms of reference to review that just under a year ago. So we're just coming up to the third anniversary of the diesel levy. In terms of reference is set out in the paper. Members also agreed to look at emissions-based charging, and this paper seeks to do that as well. Quite a bit has changed since you signed on the terms of reference, because of course we've been through the process over the last year of reviewing all of the CPZ and non-industrial charges in light of the public health agenda and our air quality action plan. And this report considers how the council might further enhance the charges for parking, so that they're more consistent with our objectives. And again, other things that have changed include the fact that we have, as a council, declared a climate change emergency. So we know elsewhere on the agenda that 25% of our carbon emissions arise from vehicles, and a large proportion of the nitrous oxides arise from diesel emission and particulate. We've also got the government shift towards ultra-low emission vehicles by 2035, brought forward from 2040, which is changing the agenda, and so the need to accelerate more quickly the behaviour change and the shift away from the traditional motor car. So the paper sets out, and it, I accept this is quite a complex paper, but it sets out how we could add to the current approach with two particular elements. One, a banded approach to carbon emissions, as adopted by the Vehicle Excise Duty, and adopted by a number of other authorities, which recognises the variance in emissions. And secondly, a ULEZ type supplement, which would deal with the NOx and the particulate matter that certain vehicles produce in greater quantities than others. And we would seek to apply this to all CPZ and non-industrial charges and to other permits and season tickets. And that approach responds directly to a number of concerns that were surfaced during the last consultation that was undertaken. And I heard at this scrutiny panel and from residents and businesses alike. Firstly, that our approach to the diesel levy was very blunt. It was a single levy on all diesel vehicles and didn't recognise the difference in those diesel vehicles. Secondly, the CPZ permits didn't recognise the different levels of CO2 emissions. We're seeking to address that through the model that's set out at the moment. And also that we failed to recognise the impact of those cars that weren't part of the CPZ or visited the borough to park and were diesel or high polluting vehicles, and we didn't seek to change the behaviour there and discourage the high polluting vehicles from it. So we're seeking to address all of those matters. And whilst we're still only in year 3 of the diesel levy, we can take some comfort, I think, from the figures that are set out in the paper, that the levy is having some impact in diesel vehicle ownership. Whilst it's hard to separate out the sort of whether this is in line with the national trends and it's the zeitgeist and the general move away from diesel vehicles, but the table set out on page 23 onwards give me some encouragement that the levy has accelerated the shift away from diesel in Merton. And in addition, members should be encouraged by the figures on page 27, which show the very significant Merton shift towards ultra-low emission vehicles, far more than out of London Borough average, far more than the London average and the national average. So more Merton residents are buying low emission vehicles, more Merton residents are shifting away from diesel. Elsewhere, the paper, I'll be brief now and come to the end, but the paper also deals with the behaviour change we want to introduce through the use of technology on the pay and display machines, recognising that we have a very large number, many of them are redundant, take very little in the way of cash. We know we can't get away completely from cash payments. We want to have fewer, smarter machines which recognise the vehicle type that's parking so that we can implement this policy for all vehicles that visit the borough. And move towards, again, more channel shift, move towards electronic permits and shift away from scratch cards. How quickly we can do that, we are open really to scrutiny's views on that. But the more we can save money in the administration of paper-based permits, the more we can reduce the cost of the council taxpayer and motorists. So we'll leave it there, Chair. If there's questions.
So just hand over to
there's not a lot I think I would add to that. I think the first point to bear in mind is that when we tackle pollution in the borough, as we've said consistently over the past couple of years, there are significant proportion of the pollution is completely outside of our control. So we have to address that which we can control through the levers available to us. We know, as Chris said, that a significant proportion of pollution in the borough does come from road transport. And ultimately there are two ways to try and tackle that. One is by reducing the number of vehicles using the roads, and second is to seek to clean up the vehicles on the roads for those who can't do without one. And when we went through the process last year, linking the charges to the P-town zones, the intention was to seek to tackle the former, so to seek to reduce the number of vehicles on the road by encouraging people towards more sustainable modes of transport for those who were within close proximity of public transport. The diesel levy, when it was introduced, was very much aimed at the second limb of cleaning up the vehicles that were using the roads. And ultimately, whilst the system that's now proposed is more complex than that, those aims remain the same. That the PTAL charging mechanism that came into force at the beginning of this year does seek to encourage people to change their transport behaviours And this model seeks to try and clean up the vehicles on the roads. I think, as Chris said, the world has moved on since the diesel levy was introduced, and the ULEZ delineates in a way that our diesel levy didn't. So I think it's appropriate to use the Mayor's ULEZ bans to apply to what's the diesel levy. But I think it's equally appropriate to recognise that the government bandings and the Mayor's ULEZ bandings are actually tackling different pollutants. And if we want a model that comprehensively tackles all pollutants, we need to build it using both the government bandings and the ULEZ. I think the model is complex, I think that's fair, but I think it's complex in a rational way, in that each of the component parts of it are seeking to address different policy objectives. I think there'll be a question over price points and price elasticity, and we had this debate last year. I was just looking at the anecdotal evidence right at the end of the report of what had caused people to change vehicles, both diesel to petrol and petrol to diesel. And I think whilst that is anecdotal, there is some evidence that the diesel levy did perhaps have an impact on people's decisions. So it has had a positive impact. There are clearly a number of things at play that make it very difficult to assess its true impact. But I think this is the right model to move forward.
Thank you, Chair. I think many of the points have already been answered already in terms of director and councillor Byers. I obviously would like to add, from my perspective, some responsibility for transport. This is about encouraging a global shift for dealing with the most polluting vehicles on our road. Yes, it is a complex system, but it is based on the GVLA and in terms of resident parking permits, but for obviously on and off street parking and what is now the diesel levy, it's based on the ULEZ-based charging the Mayor of London. In terms of the proposed charging, there is winners and losers from the system. I think the success of this policy is obviously encouraging more people to use more sustainable forms of public transport in terms of walking and cycling, but also as well in terms of buses. I know obviously the scrutiny previously dirty buses has been raised, and the Mayor has made a commitment in terms of moving to all Euro 6 buses in the next 2 years. Obviously there is the start of the rollout of electric buses, and obviously we hope the process can be quick, and you obviously will see that Councillor Hannah Brutus has raised this. In terms of the consultation process, as administration, this was we proposed that this will start in May 2020 to ensure that there is sufficient time to fully engage with resident stakeholders, community and equality group. Obviously the reason it is in May is because a lot of the period between now and May is purdah period, which makes it difficult to undertake any kind of consultation. This will be an extensive process. We want to engage with as many people as possible. As cabinet member, I believe that this is the right process going forward. As you will see within the papers, the majority of boroughs have already adopted emission-based charging, including boroughs of all political colours, including Conservative and Liberal, obviously along with Labour councils. It is right, obviously, that we charge, I think, the highest rates on the most polluting vehicles, and we have that there. Obviously, I'm willing to take any question on that. I think the role of scrutiny is extremely important for the process. Thank you.
So, I'm afraid that Councillor Fairclough will beat you to it, so then you can answer him.
I didn't know there were rules. I thought I'd you after the questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure there's a joke there about the plural of anecdotes being data amplified. I wanted to start asking about strategy, and particularly the sort of strategy that's proposed in Para 2.25. There's lots of references to making the healthy choice the easy choice. And I just think we need to look at what we think the easy choice is, and I want to know what your opinions of that are. I do think there is a conflict between driving cars off the road and encouraging people to be more environmentally friendly vehicles. So I'd be interested in your views on that. And then Para 3.15, there's a reference to the London Living Streets policies for local authorities, and sort of about 15 or 20 policies that they suggest a good local authority might want to put into place. Some of those I see in this paper, some I do not, and I just wondered if you might want to touch on some of the emissions, deliberate choice of fund there, and specifically whether the administration is looking to implement a CPZ to cover the whole borough, which is seen as a key part of the London Living Streets document, and of course is directly relevant to the charges set out here.
So the further CPZ questions to Councillor Welton. The Para 2.25, I mean, I think we have to accept that there are two separate strategies at play. There is ultimately strategy to reduce the number of vehicles on the road, and we know that if, as a nation, we are to get anywhere near the targets that the government is now setting, we are going to have to considerably speed up the pace at which people are changing their behaviours, and ultimately the PTAL structure was aimed at that, in that it sought to link the ease of access to public transport to the price that you pay for your permit. So if you do live within an area where you have very easy access to good public transport, you should be encouraged to make that choice more quickly than if you live in an area where you have very poor access to public transport. But I think equally we need to accept that we can't simply go from a position of no vehicles on the road, because that's not sustainable in the sense that it's not a sustainable position. So what the diesel levy had sought to address, and what this charging structure seeks to address, is to encourage those who perhaps can't give up a vehicle for whatever reason towards clean vehicles. And that's done on the two different structures, on the government banding and on the mayor's ULEZ banding. And I think those two aims are complementary in the sense that ultimately we need to reduce the number of vehicles on the road, but for those people who cannot or will not make that shift, we should be encouraging them to shift to the cleanest vehicle possible, and I think that's what it's done. CPZ, I think Martin will answer.
In terms of CPZ, the policy for this council has been that CPZ are triggered, consultations are triggered by petitions. We don't unilaterally decide to have consultations on CPZ. I think we obviously saw when the Democrats supplemented recently the huge controversy that caused in that borough. So some CPZs have been agreed and some haven't been agreed, but it has been an incremental process, and obviously I think it has to be resident-led, and that will continue to be policy whilst I'm the cabinet member responsible for transport.
So Lizzie, and then Councillor Holden, and then Councillor White.
So I've seen lots of figures here and I've seen lots of narrative, but I don't connect them at all. For example, 83 or 82% of vehicles on the road are cars, but 53% of the nitrogen dioxide is from commercial vehicles, and that includes Transport for London buses. So the larger vehicles are 3 times more toxic So to say to somebody, get rid of your car, maybe get your Ocado van to turn up with your groceries, that's a diesel. If you say get on a bus, that's a diesel. I checked the city today. The current Mayor of London will remove dirty diesel buses from Merton in 2037. There is no, it is true, unless you've got a letter that specifically officially, I have asked them specifically the details, and it is still 2037, unless you can show me something different, which I hope you do, because the buses are the worst polluting vehicles in this borough. So to ask people to get on a diesel bus rather than have an electric vehicle is just madness. So I think it's also interesting, if you look around the world at the number of cars per country, there's no country in the world where there are less cars than there were a decade ago. And if you go to Singapore, which said we will ban private cars and Hong Kong, there's a long waiting list, so there are still no results. I think you need to start working on what the issues are. The big issue with CPZ is all I see is concrete and gardens. I don't see less cars. And in fact, it's so interesting because in the last year, the number of registrations of diesels across the whole country has gone down by 21.8%. But the number of diesels that have CPZ permits is the same in this borough, i.e. you haven't gone down 21.8%, i.e. you have not dealt with the issue. And if you look at the air quality, it has not improved in hotspots, in Collieswood, Tooting, Mitcham and Morland. And as much as the council says here how much you care about Mitcham, I still can't work out why children's lungs in Mitcham are allowed dirty diesel from cars and TfL buses and commercial vehicles, but children in Wimbledon are not. I don't think it's right that my friends in Mitcham should suffer why my children in Wimbledon do not. So what I'd suggest, may I finish? It's very important because we've missed, well I've listened for 1 hour, 31 minutes to other people and I haven't said anything. I would think I could have 2 minutes. What you need to do is motivate people to purchase electric emission-free cars. But at the moment you're charging them. You're charging them in car parks the same as the dirty diesel. You're charging them to turn up to people's houses the same as dirty diesel. Change that. Give them free CPZs, because the quicker you do that, the quicker you'll solve this problem. Say to commercial vehicle owners that last mile should be electric. At the moment, you've never put out an email to any company around here to say that's what you want to see. And speak to TfL and say this is not acceptable, and I'd like to see that, and I hope you're right and I'm wrong, that clean buses, because Euro 6 are not clean buses. They have particulate and much NOx fibre. And it shouldn't be about politics. It should be about the environment and about people. And I'm always angry when I hear politicians talk about what they want to do. Do what the people need rather than what we want to do.
Thank you very much.
So picking up all, I'll try and pick up all those points. Firstly, on the matter of commercial vehicles, you're absolutely right, they are heavy polluters, but we have little or no control over those vehicles. They don't park in the borough, and their movement through the borough is often lawful, but usually lawful. So we're trying to deal here with those vehicles that we have the power to deal with, and to take whatever action we can take, proportionately in order to reduce the air pollution. Secondly, on the matter of buses, there are two key dates really. 2037, my understanding from the Mayor's transport strategy, is the date by when the Mayor will decarbonise the bus fleet. So that will be when they're all electric. And the Mayor has said within 2 years' time, Merton will have Euro 6
correct
quality buses.
Euro 6, correct.
So those are the cleaner buses. Cleaner, not absolutely clean, but cleaner. One of the most compelling statistics I think in this paper is that if we are to become a zero carbon by 2050, we'll need to remove 2,500 vehicles, 2,500 cars off the road each year. And I believe this paper seeks to at least move us in that direction. It's a very large number, 2,500 vehicles. And we're not going to get there in 2,500 increments. It will be a series of factors, both national government, regional government and Merton, which encourages motorists to do the right thing. and to move towards active travel, but also to move towards electric vehicles. And you're absolutely right that we should be incentivising electric vehicle ownership and use, and that's exactly what this paper seeks to do. So in the approach to CPZs, in the adoption of the vehicle excise duty approach, electric vehicles are at the left-hand end of that scale and are cheaper, far cheaper. They are the cheapest vehicle. They're not zero, because there is a price to pay in operating a CPZ. There is the administration of it, and there are the staffing costs. It could not be zero, but it is the lowest it can possibly be, reflecting the impact that those vehicles have. And that's also played out into the on and off street charges. So we're moving towards incentivising electric vehicles for on and off street charging as well, exactly in line with the point you made, by encouraging people to shift to that type of vehicle. Moving towards, you're absolutely right, Councillor Dean, that this paper doesn't declare success. We haven't cracked air quality. It will be a long time before we crack air quality. The borough still has an air pollution problem in the east and the west. And what this paper seeks to do is to build on what we believe is a success to date, the small shift in diesel car ownership, to build on that and to move towards what other steps we can take in order to encourage people to take to make the right behaviours and take the right choices. Now, it may be that some members believe that actually the diesel levy isn't high enough and hasn't had the right impact. It's impossible almost in these papers to work out where the price should be. I think it was a point that you made, Councillor Fletcher, when we were discussing this over a year ago. Beyond that, probably. So it's impossible really to work out where it should be, whether our price point has had the right impact and nudged people, or whether it's not really high enough and we should go further. So what we're seeking to do is to apply the powers that we have across a broader base, encourage people in CPZ and beyond to make the right choices, and to be a bit more sophisticated in the way that we're adopting.
I'd like to answer that because if you have an electric vehicle in Wimbledon, you pay more to park and for CPZ than a gas guzzling, dirty diesel in Mitcham. And if this was about the environment, yes, it's true, and I give all the data, it is true. If this was about environment, you would, and diesel is bad, you would charge them in Mitcham where there's filthy air, and you don't. And that's about politics. That's because people vote Labour in Mitcham, and you hope that those people keep voting for you. And the facts are, when are you going to deal with the dirty diesel in Mitcham? When are you going to look at the children in Mitcham? That's the answer. Because you don't want to know the answer. You'd rather than die.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
It's been ignored.
Thank you, Councillor. One of the things I was interested in at the beginning of the diesel tax a few years ago was what would be the metrics for success. It's been raised in full council many times by my colleague Councillor Simpson. And I looked through the report, and unless I'm mistaken, I can't find any sort of link between reduction of diesel vehicle ownership and reduction of pollution in Merton. What bit I can see is projections from the central London New Des, what's going on there, all well and good in central London, but I care about Merton. So any change, before you go ahead and do it, I want to understand what it is you're trying to achieve and what sort of targets, whether they're reasonable. Is it a target reduction in the number of vehicles? Is it a air quality particular target you're aiming for? Is it an increase in public health stats or something? So that's the sort of thing I'm really interested in. I'm also curious why it seems to be punishing some car ownership. We've had this debate before, but I'm very nervous about this desire to push everybody out of cars. That cars have a purpose, they are useful. I mean, I do accept that it would be better if they were cleaner. So we need to be encouraging people to, wherever possible, switch to cleaner. But I don't really see much of that in this report either, other than just enforced tax. So I don't know if you can comment on those points.
Certainly. So I may in a moment ask Jason just to say a little bit about air quality, because it's picked up in a subsequent report. But firstly, just picking up on the last question from Councillor Dean. If you did have, under the model that we presented here in Appendix 2, if you did have an electric vehicle in any part of the borough, in any zone, you would pay £20.
Correct. Yeah, which is the same as all cars in 2010. And what's it
Which
for
is
diesel
lower
in
than
a non-CP
any other
sector?
cost in any other
What's the
part.
diesel in a non-CP sector? It's zero.
Onto the succession measures, we can absolutely do more in clarifying what they might be, and bring that into the report that we bring to Cabinet. It would almost certainly focus mainly on the health benefits and the air pollution levels, which in the period that we've been working on this, the impact has been minimal. And we need to recognise that we operate in a broader environment, a London environment, and only with concerted action by neighbouring boroughs right across London will we have a shift. I'm given a lot of encouragement by the impact of the ULEZ in terms of that impact on polluting vehicles in the ULEZ zone and the impact on air quality there. So we should see a significant shift, but we expect to see that playing out in success measures, both on air pollution but also on public health and heart disease, levels of heart disease, and in the longer term on issues around obesity as we have more active transport. I think whilst the shift is to encourage less car ownership and fewer people travelling in cars and more people travelling actively, either cycling or walking, if this were to lead to a shift replacing every single motor vehicle with an electric vehicle, we would have failed miserably. So whilst we do want to discourage car ownership, and we do want to shift behaviour, it's not absolutely binary between the combustion engine and the electric vehicle. Because as we know from evidence, electric vehicles still produce some pollution and have a carbon cost in terms of the embedded carbon in the vehicle production. So our climate change agenda requires us to shift some people out of cars absolutely, and some people out of cars into alternate forms of transport, which may or may not be an electric vehicle.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Butler, Councillor Murray, and then Councillor Bevan.
Sorry, my point was just very detail based in that decision.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the data, predominantly. And it's really encouraging to see that outside every school since August last year we're using Fusion Tune monitoring. I'd like to just understand a bit more about what's our short term, but perhaps also long term, say 24-36 month ambition about using additional data sources from within the borough to understand what's the potentially live impact on the environment and then again inform policy on that.
Thank you, Chair. As this kind of points to cover in the general conversation around air quality. In your papers around the air quality action plan, it gives an apportionment chart for the vehicle impact on air quality, and it shows that cars, particularly diesels, contribute 32%, whereas TFO buses are 13%. All of them are bad, and I disagree with that, but there is a significant portion that is attributed to diesel cars. And there is a science behind this. Large vehicles can have chemical kits on the back, cars traditionally don't. But coming back to the data, I'm quite happy to share the 3-year trends with scrutiny. In terms of air quality, it's a complex picture. It's not simple. Air quality changes with weather conditions and political circumstances. In general, we've measured air quality in 50 locations in the borough. We've revised our network. And we were challenging about it. We looked at the areas that were of poor air quality. Some boroughs choose perhaps not to do that so much, but we were really challenging. And in some of those areas, we've seen slight increases. We've seen a number of very stable results. And we've seen quite a few decreases. We've seen some of our peak areas drop dramatically. But it's still, the borough still doesn't comply with its air quality objectives. But I'm quite happy to share this data, and we have to be really conscious about the 2019 data because that hasn't been ratified yet, which is why we only refer to 2018 in the document. We are monitoring all schools in the borough, and we're revising that at the moment and seeing what the results are. The results are going to shape some of the things that we do around schools, of course, as well.
and some of this data, it's a little bit tricky because data is annual trends, so you can't react directly to a particular problem. But around schools it will influence behaviour, of course, even if we do. We are expecting obviously lots of schools to comply, and it's more about the travel to and from school that we need to influence. So just to answer some of your questions.
But the buses are 3 times more polluting.
If we just add to what Jason was saying about, I think the question's about how can we get more real-time information about air quality. 2 initiatives we've got. One, we've been approached by the Met Office because of the work we're doing on air quality and seeing it's fairly groundbreaking. We've been approached by the Met Office to help them to develop a more localised, neighbourhood-focused framework to better predict the impact of air quality on people's day-to-day lives. And they want to use local government intelligence to see how that would play out on the streets and in the neighbourhoods. We've also won some money as part of the business rates retention scheme to look at how you can use the Internet of Things and the cheap devices that are available to link that to other information sources and then make that available. So there's a real opportunity in there that's being explored about how you could have a multitude of air quality monitors linked to the Internet of Things and make that available on people's mobile phones or the dashboard on the council's website, for example, so that people know exactly what it is. It needs a bit of interpretation, and that's where the Met Office come in. That's where people like Jason come in terms of being able to make that understandable in a real neighbourhood environment. And how's that going to affect you? What's that air quality today going to mean in terms of what you want to do? And if you've got a particular health issue, how might that affect you in your particular circumstances?
That's really, really encouraging to hear as well, and also, we've heard various stories in Vaughan Council about sufferers with respiratory issues and how conscious they are about going out on certain days, so that's really helpful. I just want a very sort of open question about various other data sources in council, particularly with Pioneer and pushing a lot of people use the Ringo app. I wonder how useful is that and other data sources to support more annualised analysis?
Yeah, I think Chris is absolutely right. There's a number of innovative projects underway. We're testing some real-time monitors, cheap real-time monitors. At the moment, you have your very expensive stations that cost tens of thousands of pounds. And we have secured some funding for that in one of six, so I think it works around £5 million. So there are some bigger stations going in the borough. But Chris is right, there is lots of different pieces of information that need to be pulled together into this Internet of Things, I think we call it. And Met Office are looking at that as well as some of the local data collected by citizens and how that all gets pulled together and used all the time. But it's new. We still have a few years left on the Air Quality Action Plan, so yeah, I think that will, as time goes on, that information will become clearer. And it will influence people's changes. They may say, I won't cycle out with this pollution stuff. It doesn't resolve the underlying problem of that pollution, it's sort of exclusive the problem.
Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a number of us who've touched on issues around the charging model and the price points. Like you mentioned, we'd probably like to come back to it. And I wanted to also touch on evidence as well. We have some reference to the 17 of the other boroughs that have emissions-based schemes. There's lots of different ways they do that. Some are as complex as this, and some are simpler. But what there isn't in this paper is any analysis of whether that makes a difference to effectiveness of the scheme. That maybe that data doesn't exist, but I wonder if that's something to look at. I'm also very interested in the charging model on page 95. At the moment, the emissions bands A2X are cheaper than the current charges, and I'm sure there's a technical reason for that, but I wonder what that technical reason was, that's the point that we choose. I also wanted to ask about positive measures. There's a brief reference to the Mayor's scrappage scheme, but actually, as Councillor Holden touched on, it's not just about taxing people, it's about giving them a reason to change. Brent Council, and I don't know how effective this was, but Brent Council had a thing where if you gave up your residence pass, they gave you 200 quid to buy a bike. Now, I don't know if those kind of things work, but there's nothing in this paper about kind of positive measures that we might choose. So I wondered if it was possible to touch on some of those. And my last point is possibly a dig at the evidence, but we talked about PTAL rating. Of course, TfL's data suggests that there's a very strong relationship between PTAL, high PTAL, and a low access to cars. So people already give up their cars when they have PTAL rating. And we also know that, as Chris points out, that ULEZ has been very successful. That's road user price charging. And the evidence that we have been presented during the calling was about off-street parking and the relationship between that. And of course, this model is still around massively charging parked vehicles in controlled parking zones only. And that seems to be where we're putting our eggs on the road. Just on Bread Place Road.
Well, I'll try and pick up the questions in the order. In terms of the effectiveness of the other boroughs' emissions-based charging approaches, I don't think we have any evidence of that at the moment. We'll see if we can gather any and bring it into the cabinet paper. On page 96, the table that sets out the resident permit banding, we adopted band G as the current charges as a baseline, and anything more polluting in the middle band would be more expensive. Anything to the left of that would be less expensive. But it's a model, it's illustrative for the purposes of just displaying how it might work. And then there's may have a view about where the baseline should be. It could be left or to the right of that. But it's set out for comment really. I haven't come across very many, if any, incentive approaches at the boroughs, so I'll have a look at the Brent one. I'm not familiar with that at all. I don't know whether they're not capital. But anything we can do to encourage people out of their car and into an alternative form of transport. Clearly there'll be some people who just decide to give up the car and take the cash, and you can't legislate for that. But if there are ways in which we can accelerate the shift and reduce carbon, then that would be of interest. And the point about PTAL, if I understood it correctly, I think it was that TfL already acknowledged that those who have good accessible transport have less car ownership. That doesn't always seem to be the case in Merton, where we do have a high level of car ownership in very good levels of PTAL rating. And maybe it's relative to the other parts of the borough, but the more we can do in the approach that was adopted last year and implemented in January this year does seek to recognise that there are parts of the borough of better transport where you've got 2 or 3 cars still owned and parked and operated per household. And anything we can do to nudge that will just improve the shift away from the motor vehicle. It seems a good thing. So I can't dispute TfL's figures, but it may well be that Merton needs to do more in that area in order to shift behaviour. I'm sorry, I missed the very last point about off-street parking.
So it was that the evidence that we've seen, and we've talked a lot about the evidence for this over multiple times, we've been over this, but the most effective type of action, things like the ULEZ are road user price charging, and also there is definitely a correlation between off-street parking and use of vehicles. But what we still lack is any real evidence that charging higher charges on parked vehicles particularly changes behaviour, and especially that high kind of level of activity of giving up your car, which I still think is supposed to be the main element of this paper.
I suppose the easy answer to that is time will tell. We are going to shift 2,500 cars per annum, and those are in CPZ and outside of CPZ. Then price must have a driver. Price, as we know, in economics has an impact on people's choices, and we're seeking to sophisticate that blunt instrument and encourage the right behaviour. And at a point, I suspect price will absolutely change people's behaviour, whether they own or don't own the car.
I just wondered if it was worth either Chris or Jason touching on the clean air segment of the work that we're going to look at
we wanted to start the work in 2019, and we started scoping the work. But unfortunately, it's a very expensive process, so we've now secured, I think it's £250,000 worth of funding starting from April this year, so we'll start that work in pace. If it's successful, and it's a long and complex process, it's not something you can just put in place. As you can see with the layers, it does take a number of years of consultation. And indeed, the scoping report may show that it's buses that are a problem, and therefore it gives us leverage to go back to TfL. But until we do that, it's what's difficult to say, but it's not something we do quickly, but it's something we've got some funding for the next 3 years.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the 12 low emission zones that the Mayor of London has put together, it's buses that have been the problems. The High Street is an extremely good example, but used to, within days of January, just blow all of the pollution numbers out of the water. And now that's not the case. So it's quite clearly, just look at the data, just go and talk to City Hall about the 12 low emission zones. So that's what you have to do with TfL, get rid of their dirty buses. I think the second thing is, Councillor Fairclough is right about UNES, is that because those commercial vehicles, which are dirty, and the buses, the commercial vehicles in particular, are taxed, then they're not going into central London. So it's about the diesels that you need to change behaviour. And if you look at the figures here, the number of diesels is not decreasing in the CPZs, when the number of diesels around the country is, so it isn't working. I think you're looking at the data wrongly. So you need to look at all diesel within Merton. You need to write to all businesses to say you need to take commercial vehicles that are diesel off the road. You need to say the same to the Mayor of London. They are your issues, not private car owners, just in a few areas of Wimbledon. You need to look at the whole borough, and you must look at Mitcham. And you don't need any more data. You don't need the Internet of Things. You don't need any more knowledge. What we need is to change behaviour. One last thing I'll say about electric cars. I do own an electric car, but I don't need to sort of add to that. They're particulates. There are no air toxicity in London because of an electric vehicle. And they break 90% less, which means the only particulates are 1/10. So a bus, which breaks much more, significantly higher particulates in its tyres than any electric vehicle. So we must get the facts right, and we must change. If you have public transport on Sundays, you have less cars. If you have public transport went from Pollard's Hill to Rains Park, you'd have less cars. But there isn't, and therefore that's why people do have cars. I'm sorry, one more thing. Scratch cards you have to keep. There are enough people in Merton that can't read or write, don't have computers, and they will not be able to deal with this. And you mustn't move away from scratch cards for those people. Over 65 and 100%.
Yeah, just on the point about diesel, on page 24, there's a table there that sets out the diesel permits in CPZ. And what that tells me is that there has been a reduction in diesel permits in CPZ. So in 1718 we issued 5,578. We have increased the number of cars, the number of vehicles in CPZ, we've expanded. And we're now only issuing 5,337. So the percentage of diesel permits has gone down from 29.46% to 26.68%. So it's gone down in absolute terms and in relative.
That's conflation. Those two data points are conflating.
1718 to 1920. And if you compare the figures on the previous page, the diesel ownership nationally, in London, and in outer London, and in Merton, 26.68 is lower than the 2018 point of diesel ownership generally. And we have that from the DVLA, so we can be pretty accurate in terms of the vehicle ownership in Merton and nationally. So in our CPZs now, 26.68%,
which is a percentage of the total.
Is a percentage of those vehicles that are registered in CPZs that are diesel, and that's gone down from 29.46 to 26.6, and it's gone down in absolute terms from 5,578 to 5,377, despite the expansion of zones.
Well, I don't know what the expansion of zones are, but I know that the number of diesels that were registered last year went down 21.8%. That's 1/5, and these figures don't show that.
Well, it's gone down from 30.5% for a while to 26.7%.
No, that's an absolute the total number. And the total number has gone up. 26% of the bigger number is very similar to 29% of the smaller number. You're from 13 figures.
No, I don't think so.
You are. Well, I'm very happy to discuss it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Councillor Butler, please.
Yeah, thank you. This leads to what Councillor Dean was saying, actually, because I'm maybe completely misunderstanding parts of the picture there in terms of what data we need. A lot of this report talks about ownership, but I'd be interested to see what information can be gathered, especially from London TfL, about journeys made. It seems clear to me in my head that a bus full of 30 people is often the case 30 or close to 30 cars that are not on the road. I'd just be interested to see how data on the journeys basis is being put into this and the success that you want to see in moving people away from car journeys. Yes, that's a better way of, a nicer way of saying it.
So I don't know whether Ben can answer that in terms of journeys made and whether we have any data on that and whether we could bring forward.
I don't particularly have it here. Speak with colleagues who, in future Merton, the local communication plan, they may have some more data on modal transport. So I'll certainly pick that up and bring that back to the cabinet report to demonstrate what movement there has been and what aspirations we do have. But I don't have any data on the shift this evening.
I think when we agreed the detail charging, one of the things we agreed when we assessed it was looking at the number of public transport journeys made and whether that had shifted as a result of the charging structure. So likely we can look at it like that and figure it out.
Yeah, thank you. One of the interesting points of the diesel tax over the years was the large number of people that wrote to me and Stephen Hammond about the inequity between Euro 6B and things. So one aspect we're quite pleased that there's a movement based on more recognised as London and national position rather than just London force diploma. So I don't know if Mr. Miller who wanted me to raise this one, it's all been raised, so I'm not going to read out his email. But here's an example of somebody that wrote to me and to Council Operators. So I can get back to him and say that this is changing. So that's a good point. The point about the qualities and impact assessments. How do you thought of scoring? Because, for instance, on pregnancy and maternity, you say there's no negative impact. But if I'm not mistaken, if you're making it more and more difficult to have a vehicle and with this policy, most pregnant people end up somebody drives them to hospital, and in their first years of life, most parents have a car to take their young babies around. Everybody asks me to work with this because they're children. So surely it would be a negative impact on new families, and why is that not reflected in the assessments?
Well, Ben might want to add, but it's a price issue that we're talking about here rather than an issue which affects a particular protected characteristic. So, for your argument to be true, it would mean that all pregnant women or women with young children can't afford to pay the price that we're seeking to increase the permits by. It doesn't affect them per se because of their protected characteristic. It only affects them because of the increased price.
They're more likely to have a vehicle, they're more likely to get hit. I don't need the cars, I'm fine, I would get hit by any of these. I'm just talking about families, people, elderly relatives. It's those sorts of issues that always worry me the most. Not those of us at working age who can never get around very easily.
Do you want to?
No, it's primarily around the price. Testing. We have picked up on other matters such as the scratch cards for the elderly and disability that they may not be able to use or have access to a computer. And so when we engage with the equality groups, we will pick that up and we will discuss with them to make sure we meet their needs. But in terms of pregnancy, don't believe the policies here have a direct result, apart from it being a socio-economic issue, that could affect any of the groups with special characteristics. And there is a category, socio-economic, which we have identified this in, and looked at some mitigation action points that we will address and talk with the quality groups through.
Okay, so Councillor Hogarth, and then I think we'll start wrapping things up.
Thank you, Chair. I did actually want to ask about the equality impact assessment. Just on the pregnancy protected characteristic, I think I'm right in remembering that the PTAL-based proposal suggested negative impact for that protected characteristic. So if we're making the charges higher, it seems unlikely that that wouldn't carry over. But anyway, that wasn't the point I wanted to make. I wanted to ask about the distribution of, if there's any information on the distribution of vehicles across the block. Because it occurs to me that especially socio-economic status, but possibly also race, although it's a much more subtle and different picture, there might be potential impact on both those characteristics depending on older, categorising wildly, but there's probably a higher incidence of older vehicles amongst those of lower socio-economic status because they tend to be cheaper. So there might be something.
We certainly have the data of sales of permits by CPZ, so we have it at that level. Whether we layer that with parts of the borough and other data, we can potentially look at that. But that's a layer we haven't gone to, but we know it by ward and by CPZ area, and the types of vehicles, whether it be diesel or high emission or low emission, within each CPZ. So we have that data. It's not presented here, but bring that into the cabinet report. If there's another set of data you'd like us to cross and actually think might be helpful and useful, we'll certainly look at that as well.
Thank you. No, I just thought there probably is a picture there about the distribution of vehicles across the different parts of the borough that may impact the quality impact assessment, especially in that socio-economic.
Okay, so should we move to the recommendations? I imagine there are some.
Well, I'd like to say, if this council believes that diesels are dirty, that every diesel should be treated the same way. And that includes commercial vehicles and transport for London buses. And the reasons is that children's lungs suffer from nitrogen dioxide and particulates, particularly 2.5. As an aside, this council can't do too much about London's carbon emissions, but it can specifically deal with the toxic air. And the objective of the diesel tax was about air toxicity. And therefore you have to deal with the problem. And that's why we need to treat every diesel the same way.
So, do you want to please
accept it?
Can we have control of the commercial ones?
But you can speak to no commercial company has ever been spoken to about their dirty diesels. The council needs to accept that the particular nitrogen dioxide comes from commercial vehicles and buses more than cars, and it doesn't accept it at the moment. It needs to.
As we come to this point, there are a number of objectives that are covering air quality with different types of vehicle. We have the low emission zone for London that's being tightened up by the mayor, which will affect commercial vehicles. We have a commitment to London buses, albeit a little bit slow. We have initiatives around taxes. It's about what we can do as a council and the control measures we have and how we contribute to the overall picture. So those areas are actually on the agenda, and it's about how we, as a local authority, then do our part in that picture.
Put it in my Merton, put it on Twitter. I don't want to hear about other problems. I want to hear about diesel. Saying to people, diesels are bad for children.
So could the recommendation be publicity campaign around diesel?
I prefer that this council treats diesels the same because it doesn't treat diesels within this borough the same, even the ones it can control in control parking zones. It should treat them the same. If you believe it, treat the same.
Okay, do you want to read that to the vote then? All those in favour? Sorry, yes, just forgive me. So, very excitedly seconded by Councillor Holland. All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining? So was that 2 abstentions? Yeah,
I'm not sure that's the. So what's the wording of the motion?
That all diesel be treated the same, and because what was it?
If diesels are responsible for air toxicity in Merton, all diesels that this council can control in terms of policy should be treated the same way.
But that's the current policy.
No, it is not. No, it is not. Read your documents, 104, from page 5 to 104, gives you the document.
Okay, sorry, you answer and then...
I mean, I would like to say, obviously, in terms of business and trade permits for commercial vehicles, there will be a diesel levy issued on them, which is in page 98 and page 100 of Exton that you've seen.
Yes, I know. I don't forget numbers. But I'd like to be specific about the CPZs, and not all of them pay a diesel level.
They will pay it, obviously, a levy, because obviously we're going through a new system, but they will have to put registration.
It's not been passed by council.
Diesel, and if that is passed by council, obviously there's...
Councillor Alton, in the last Sustainable Communities Panel, I was told you can't change anything because it's been passed by council. Ergo, the opposite applies. This has not been passed by council, therefore I can make that proposal. And it's for you to take it on. Should you treat them all the same? And my view is that you should.
Okay. Is everybody clear on what that was?
I can say it again.
So, yeah, would you like to just say it one more time, just for clarity? Then nobody chip in, there'll be no side comments. Please just say the motion and let Rosie write it down.
If diesels are bad for air toxicity in Merton, then all diesels that can be controlled by this council should be treated the same way.
I just have some clarification. From what I've heard here, we are talking about the ones with controls, and then Jason's just helpfully laid out all the types of vehicles that we don't have controls over, but London is tackling. And I don't see how this is aiding that.
Because
I might be very confused.
So in CPZs in Mitcham, they are charged diesel tax, the same as they are. I just said the same. Is it exactly the same figures? Only because the figures I've got are not. The levy is different.
I think I can help in the sense that the diesel levy isn't different. It's that the actual CPZ parking charge makes difference. So the combination of the two. The point I wanted to make in opposition to this is that not all diesels are the same. Look, the modern diesels are more environmentally friendly and therefore should be treated.
Okay, so now that we've had some clarity, let's move to a vote again. Just to clarify, seconded by Councillor Holden, I guess. All those in favour? All those against? Chance in now. Okay, right. I will be slower to the vote next time, I promise. Right, is there any other recommendation?
I'd like to put a recommendation, and I hope someone might second, that the Cabinet put a greater focus on incentives to encourage and support residents to change their vehicles to less polluting.
I'll second that.
So when you say great focus on incentives, what kind of things do you mean?
So coming back to the debate, we touched on whether there is any evidence of sort of positive incentives that might be used, maybe like the example of Brent, or certainly there could be advertising around the mayor's scheme, for example. My reasoning for this is some of my fear is that actually it's going to be very difficult for many lower earners to change their vehicles, and we're going to end up penalising them by using the parking charges up where they have CPZs, and they're not going to be able to change their vehicle. We'll get rid of it.
Carrots rather than just a stick.
So could it be about looking at the evidence around the carrots rather than the sticks? Because I'd be reluctant to say, let's just bring in all of the carrots if you don't know which ones actually work.
I felt that putting the focus on allowed scope for the Cabinet to look at how they do that.
Can we look at? I would be happy to vote for it if it was, can we specifically look at the evidence around the carrots rather than sticks?
The evidence will be tax more.
And if you can say wording that includes that, I'm happy to agree with that.
No, I was building on both the points about including examples from across other boroughs in the cabinet report on the point you're making about, because it would naturally show the evidence as well.
How about that the cabinet looks at the evidence with the intention of putting greater focus on incentives to encourage and support residents to change their behaviour.
Examples from other boroughs.
Including examples from
Yeah.
other boroughs.
Say that again. I couldn't hear it down as soon as everyone correct, sorry.
That the cabinet looks at the available evidence with the intention of putting a greater focus on incentives that encourage and support residents to change their vehicles to less polluting ones. For example, from our boroughs.
That's perfectly reasonable, isn't it?
Okay, with that now. Okay, so Councillor Person.
Chair, just so familiar, the new facilities are in older towns, so do we make a differential there?
This paper does do that. They've got rid of the Blue Cross trauma of the previous diesel tax and brought in more in line with what the vehicle excise duty in London dealers is doing, which is modern diesels, particularly clean ones with chemical treatments like AdBlue, are basically can clean up the air cleaner than the air that goes into the engine. So they won't be penalised anymore. So that's what we get a lot of fast on something.
Thank you very much. So if you just read it out one more time, just so we can all be clear and listen quick. And it's been seconded by who, sorry? Councillor Holden.
Not what I've got written down, that's trying to remember it. That the cabinet look at the available evidence with the intention of putting a greater focus on incentives to encourage and support residents to change their vehicles to less polluting, for example.
All those in favour? Okay, anything else? Yes, I mean, get reading now.
This one isn't quite so formulated. I wanted to come back on the point about the quality impact assessment, and I would like to make a recommendation that this issue of distribution of vehicles is looked at, because I think there is something in it. I think we might find that the heavier polluting vehicles are in certain parts of the borough, and that will have disproportionate impact. And I don't see that in the EIA at the moment, so I would like to think about that. And I also didn't mention, I'm slightly concerned about visitor permits as well, and I think there could be a quality impact issue there.
Doesn't it?
And again, that doesn't.
What does make reference to the visitor permits and that there's more work that needs to be done around that. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to kind of preempt what happens in that, right?
No, although one of the things that the paper asked for is feedback on the EIA, so
Yeah, that's fine. So you wanted to include vehicle types into the vehicle distribution to the borough?
Can I just ask a question of officers? Is that practically possible, given the data, to understand socio-economic background to a granular level with type of vehicle ownership?
I mean, we will try and find out whether we can get that sort of information from the DVLA. I'm interested in the link to the equality impact assessment, the equality analysis, given that geography isn't a protected characteristic. It will be interesting, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the equality.
So my thinking is, we know that the east of the borough tends to be where those sort of lower socio-economic status live, broadly speaking. That's not geography, that's the geography point. But obviously there is an equality impact point on socio-economic status and potentially race, and I think there could be some issues there, although except it's much more subtle. So So yes, it's a proxy rather than.
So, do you want to formulate to say that so we get someone to go on in monitoring in a second?
So what I had was that the Cabinet considers the full quality impact of their proposals across the borough by looking at available data on car ownership by area to see if it impacts quality impact assessment.
Okay, anyone second?
Yep, I will.
Okay, all those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining?
Suggest that carry.
Two in favour, 6 abstentions, no against, therefore it carries.
Is that possible to change the vote?
No.
Well, we've just gone back through this a minute ago, somebody else saying everyone just changed their vote, so if you want to do it again, we can, but yeah.
Well, you're the chair, if you wish to do it again, but I didn't think you could change your vote afterwards. Well, why don't you run it
Well,
again?
I vote against it.
Well, run it again then.
Okay, who's in, those in favour? Who votes against? Oh, that's like magic. Who's abstaining?
Point of order, can we do that? We didn't actually carry out the vote last time. We just went really quickly through it and then actually discovered we didn't quite have a recommendation. That sort of counted the point. Whereas this one, we definitely had a
I
vote.
thought the vote was carried.
The vote was
Like
carried.
last time because I made notes of who did what. So
Yeah.
I thought it was an official.
Yeah, that was the first time.
The first time.
But did it for this vote?
No, for the
The one we did for before. I think that's a different situation.
You're asking if we can redo it. We did redo it last time.
But I don't think
Changed.
we did redo it last time in the sense that we didn't look at the results and then go, oh no, that's not the result we want. We actually realised we didn't quite know what the recommendation was. Somebody said what's the recommendation, so we actually then had a whole debate about it.
No, I'm afraid.
Whereas this was a vote, then we didn't like the result, so we changed our vote.
But I think that, Anthony, I
Yeah.
asked them if they could change it or not, and they said they could. So
And so, as chair, if you said that I've changed my vote to go against it because I don't think we've come to a conclusion to say that should be carried, given that most people weren't comfortable with it, so enough to kind of positively support it. So I'm voting against it. If that means then when we ran it again, it was stopped. So it's fallen. Sorry.
I'm not sure we can do that.
Okay. Any other recommendations?
I'm sorry to bring up the scratch card, and I know it has been covered, but really, I don't think we need to vote on it. We've got to recognise that people without computers, people who don't read well, will not be able to have access to these things. And permits are not about owning cars, they're about people coming around to see them, dropping off washing machines, home help, etc. And they're the ones that will really suffer from this, because they really won't have an outlet for dealing with them.
Anything else? Okay, fine. We'll move on. So we are now moving on to the Air Quality Action Plan, agenda item number 6. And I'll hand over to the first person.
Thank you, Chair. Just as an introduction to this, this is an annual report on the Council's Air Quality Action Plan. We are entering the second year of the plan, and it is important to note it's a 5-year plan. It's ambitious in its nature. It was built on the work of the Air Quality Task Group back in 2016, and there made a number of recommendations. It's a document that's owned by all departments of the council, not just the thing. We have part of the colleagues here, but it also covers transport, planning, and various other areas. There are some 70 measures in the document. I won't go through them individually because I realise it's quite late, but I'm happy to take questions, recommendations. I've also provided a matrix of where we are in terms of our target dates. They should be graduated, and they should give you an idea of where we are. So myself and my colleague here are willing to answer any questions.
Well, it's a statement, but I think you need to be far more aggressive looking at what you're trying to achieve and make sure this is moved beyond the policy the issues with air quality are dealt with, and we've discussed them, so we don't need to go through them. You know what they are, your team knows what they are, you know where they're coming from, at the moment politics is stopping you doing your job.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Paragraph 7.3, reducing emissions in building developments. One of the measures in the London Living Streets mini manifesto was the use of Section 106 and SIL to make PTAL improvements, and I wonder if that was something that you considered.
That's absolutely correct. We are currently drafting up a Merton-specific supplementary planning document, and in that we'll set out our ambitions for air quality, including the use of Section 106 and SIL, and also contribution to the regulation of construction in the council.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping you could elaborate a bit further on the work around schools. It was good to see the monitoring, but in some areas it will have be quite challenging to implement schemes because of the location of school traffic, main road, etc. So how will you attend to those situations?
We dedicated a whole section of the air quality action plan to schools, and it's been changing. It's not something that's been static. We have the SNAP project, which is the public health project that looks at the issue wider than air quality. We also have the school streets. It's basically that we need to look at the data from each school and have a bespoke solution for them. It isn't one size fits all. Maybe that if you can't restrict traffic, then you look at other mitigation around fencing and that sort of thing. But we are working closely with our transport colleagues around the way people travel to and from work. But there isn't a one size fits all, unfortunately. There's some locations that are not suitable for some of the measures.
Thank you for the support. I was on that task group, and it was a good piece of work at the time. Like people already mentioned, some things that we've done. I'm looking at action point 42, which is slightly disappointing. To the red. There's not many on the right rating. It's about providing internal training on air quality to departments and councillors. This has been a bit disappointing because the councillors claim this is an issue, but as yet we've not managed to arrange ourselves, or the council hasn't told it if you have any plans for that, and whether this could be extrapolated more to the climate stuff as well. So I imagine that's going to be coming in tandem with this.
There's two separate strands to this. There's one around the education, the awareness raising around air quality. So there are two separate issues here. There's one around the provision of information around planning to assist officers and members in understanding some of the jargon that's spoken, some of the misinformation. There's also one around anti-labelling, and my colleague Maya will probably update that on that issue leading on the project. Do we have dates on that?
We're waiting for confirmation, so 2 dates were put out for the taxation presentation. So I believe that's the 4th of March and the 16th, and those dates will be disseminated. I'm just waiting to have feedback on that, and we'll take them as a couple of days. Some kind of brochures in January, bonds posted in January. Yeah, I'm not sure who and what there, but so we'll be looking for March for that one. And then if you go to the air quality and planning section, we have a provisional date, the 29th of April, and we're just going to put that out to other members to see what the uptake is on that.
My suggestion for planning, it's a short piece, might be worth trying to tack it onto a planning committee meeting, because my experience of members attending planning training to be vocal. I've attended before, even though I generally know it. When I go and sold that to the officer, he goes down while you're here. And I go, well, I don't need to be here. So if you tack it on to planning committee, find one that has a light agenda maybe. If this can help with setting that up, I think that might be a prudent thing, because otherwise you're not going to get them there at another time. Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, when we talk about the action matrix, I just want to understand how how you judge rank status, but also when, so for example, the first one we talked about, implementation date is ongoing, and you flag it green, how do we know, or how do you know what the breach is, and how do you measure a breach? Is a breach when it goes into, say, no action before a month is due, or when it's breached, how do you judge that?
We review the matrix, I think, every month to 2 months at the latest. Some of these actions are ongoing as part of the Council's DNA in terms of their like monitoring is not something that's going to change. But invariably down the line, if something does change, we can then regulate it. So there are sort of many things in there that are ongoing work that don't have finite dates, but we still review them in case they fall up on the agenda. So I hope that answers your question.
Slightly connected to it, just out of interest, are you using the Merton Way, or are you using MSP? How are you, from program methodology, how are you judging your success using this? Or is it just an internal methodology you're using?
It's currently internal, and we're obviously reporting back to our directors and our
Thank you. There's a latest question from me on to my previous question. Item 16 was about how can the public improve their homes to reduce air pollution. Would it be worth either scrapping this or putting it into the climate one instead? Because the public are beginning to ask more about climate per se rather than just purely air quality.
That's actually quite an interesting comment. Yes, it is going to be a part of the climate change strategy. We can't directly control existing buildings, we can control the planning agenda. But it is one of those contributing factors to air quality that is quite significant. But from a climate perspective and an air quality perspective, if you insulate your home and you have a heating system, then you cover both of those.
I mean, once the diversion plan is published, there will come to be
Any recommendations on that? Okay then, I think we'll move on to performance monitoring. Ben, did you want to say anything?
Just a few notes that I made before, and then we can have the let's go through it. It's a bit of a short list than normal. So the income generation from regulatory services seems to be on a long-term downtrend. I know we've talked slightly about it before, but maybe a little bit of explanation about that, if you could. And then going on to, we've had a lot of conversations about Veolia and street inspections, but this seems to be still way below target in terms of the first one, at least the CRP 048. Centre site surveys for the litter that are below standard. And moving on to the leisure section, an annual measure on the 14 to 25 year olds fitness centre participation at leisure centres. Just wondering if there's any knowledge of strategy there. And then lastly, going on to development and building control, the number of planning enforcement cases closed, just to have I know we talk about this quite regularly, but an update on where the team is on that. That's it.
So, being with them in reverse order, I'll ask Kath to pick up the points about regulatory services. Just starting with the planning enforcement cases, we are pretty confident that we will end the year with no case in the system that's more than a year old. Now, having a backlog of cases that are only a year old means that we're dealing with live cases that are either pending some form of enforcement or still gathering information, and that will be a much smaller number than we've done here. We've yet to see what that number will be, but we will have cleared hundreds and hundreds of cases, and we've used additional resources. We may drift into the first couple of months of the next financial year, but we will will be down to a manageable caseload, which is business as usual, rather than the run of the battle. And I'm looking at that on a regular basis. It's interesting you pick out the leisure centre visitors, because it was one I was going to pick out, because it is a concern. The initial response from GLA, it's because they say it's because of a number of very cheap gyms that have opened up in the vicinity of their locations, which has abstracted the visitor to the gym users. We've asked them for some much more detailed analysis, which Chris Parslow is preparing and working with GLA on, and also for them to set out what are they going to do to reverse that picture. What's the strategy they're going to take? I saw just last week they had a double cover on Wimbledon Times. That's not the only marketing they can use, but they need to set out what are they going to do to get those leisure centre users back. On the Veolia performance, we expect to see this continue to improve. The December figures are better. We've improved in January on the December figures. The service improvement notice before Christmas and the settlement with Veolia in terms of the annual review that was reported to the last scrutiny are all helping to make sure that the capacity is in the right place and that Veolia have a sustainable business. So John Bodley, if we were here, would be talking about the steps that are being taken by Veolia on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the cleaning of the building continue to improve and get closer to that target. We won't hit that target in this year because of the proximity to the end of the year, but I think we've got a much better chance of hitting next year's target given the more sustainable position we're in.
Okay, okay, regulatory services. I think this question was raised at the last meeting as well. We've been undertaking quite a lot of transformation work in partnership with the moment. Members will probably be aware that we transferred the ones who was set into partnership. We're currently developing a number of IT systems, which is Triberr, which will create a number of efficiencies and set another platform up for us. We're looking at areas such as pre-application advice, certainly around air quality and other developments. Developers are interested in talking to us about that sort of stuff. We are looking around some of the licensing areas. The animal welfare licensing regulations changed about a year ago, and we're aware that there are dog walkers and dog sitters and businesses like this who are probably trained without a license and aware that they have to be regulated now under the new system. So ultimately, some projections were made for capturing some of that, and we will be looking to educate and help them out with regard to going through that system. But we are conscious that with the changes that we've done, we have been more concentrating on getting the right skills in and getting the staff in the right places. We're not going to hit that target this year, but we've certainly got a number of ideas in the pipeline with regard to achieving it in future years.
The two points. SP 526, a percentage of council fleet using diesel fuel. The target is 80%. Because it's new, I'm assuming that's why there's no response so far. But I'm assuming you're somewhere near 80%. You're not at less than sort of 50%. Before I get an answer to that, I'd like to say that I think you missed your recycling target for the 120th month in a row.
I don't know the figure on diesel. It's one that we measure annually, and we'll have that at the end of the year or shortly after the end of the year. But it is one that we're actively pursuing, particularly with the fleet management under John Bosley. We are taking whatever steps we can really to replace any diesel vehicles with hybrids or petrol vehicles. In some areas that's not possible, and the fleet used by our contractor, for example, we simply can't shift the refuse collection vehicles to an affordable non-diesel vehicle at the moment. But for our in-house fleet, for some of the smaller vans and cars, we want to get fewer of them, and we want to get whatever we absolutely have to have on a much cleaner fuel type.
So it's somewhere around 80 though, it's not 20 or 50.
I don't know what the figure is.
Okay. You'll let me know that.
we're approaching 10 o'clock, so if there's any other questions I can say with the meeting, if not, then we move on to the work programme. Should we move on? Okay, so just to note, we've had a few changes, I think, kind of stacked up in the last meeting now, due to the election and whatever else we've been dealing with. So we've got Veolia coming back to us. So fine, I think that'll be a nice send off for the year. We've got housing strategy support for private renters, and we've got the libraries and our culture and design review panel. There may still be some movement over the coming weeks, over the next few weeks, just to see if we can fit everything in. We've taken out cabinet member priorities. Congratulations. And so we've just got quite a full schedule next time. So thank you very much for the time. Have a lovely evening.